Okay, so I just put this together kind of to help myself in teaching photography online or a hybrid or a Hyflex class. My district isn't sure what it's going to do yet, and also to help anybody else who is interested. So, this video is just going to cover kind of an introduction to online and hybrid and Hyflex, issues about equipment and software, basic engagement over Zoom, teaching Photoshop and Photo P online, studio time, running critiques online, peaks and valleys and agendas, and why they're so very important in online teaching. I mean, they're important anyway, but especially in online teaching, and then present and absent breaks. So, first of all, don't freak out. You're teaching photography. It's the same photography that you've already always taught. You're teaching camera skills, you're teaching software, you're teaching composition and photo history and ethics and when is it okay to take a photo and when it's not, and war photography and all those kinds of things. Teaching students how to express themselves and develop a visual voice, all that kind of stuff. So stick to your curriculum and then, just make little adjustments here or there. But, here's part of my curriculum for Photo One, nothing earth shaking, but, I'll be following these kinds of things in my teaching. So how does it work? So with online, you're on the computer, everybody else is on the computer, they're at home, great. You're teaching through Zoom or something like that. In a hybrid classroom, you'll be in the class, half your students will be in your class, and half your students will be at home. In a Hyflex classroom, half your students are in class, half are at home, and then there'll be a small amount who will be going along with the class asynchronously. So they won't be participating in the Zoom classes or the classroom classes. They'll be like watching videos afterwards and doing assignments. So I highly recommend a YouTube video called How I Would Approach Fall Semester, Zoom Flex Based View by Mike Caulfield. It's amazing. It'll just totally make you change the way you think about online teaching. So a hybrid or a Hyflex class. So instead of thinking, okay, I'm teaching these kids in my room, how do I include all the kids over Zoom? No. You want to think the exact opposite. It's I'm teaching the kids on Zoom. How am I going to include the kids in the room? So actually, what works best is that if everybody is essentially distance learning, everybody's in front of a computer, everybody's logged into Zoom. The kids in your classroom that you're physically in the classroom with while you're on Zoom, you should ask them to turn off their mics, or, mute themselves just so there's no feedback. If they want to participate in the discussion, then they should speak up so that the mic on your computer picks them up. But that way, everybody's looking at the same things. Everybody can engage in the same software and the same online experience. So you think about it as an online experience that people in the room will be included in. Okay. And then in Hyflex, you're going to have some students, possibly if your district does this, that will not be on Zoom, whether they're in the classroom or at home. They are going to participate after the fact at a different time. So for them, you are going to send them the link to the recording of the Zoom class and then have equivalent activities for them to do. So they're not doing exactly the same things that the students in class or at home over Zoom are doing, but they are doing equivalent activities. This is not necessarily new in teaching. We've been doing understanding by design and, backwards design and differentiation where, think about what it is that I want my students to know and be able to do. And then you come up with a bunch of different activities that allow them to demonstrate that they understand those ideas. So you just give the students that are the Hyflex students, the asynchronous students, something that is similar. So like, let's say that you had a critique in class over Zoom, real time, those asynchronous students could not go along with it. But They could watch the video after the fact, the Zoom class, and then they could type up some additional things. And what would be really great is have them write new ideas that were not mentioned in the discussion. That keeps them accountable for actually watching the critique. You could mark them down if they repeated anything that anybody else said. And it makes them really think about what their peers were talking about and come up with new ideas. And they would turn that in, and that is what you would grade. So, equipment and software. We are photography teachers. We love digital SLRs. I have an EOS R. I love my mirrorless camera. We love Photoshop CC, 2020, whatever. We love all that stuff. But there's a pandemic, and we don't necessarily get to use it. I was against students using phones for a really long time. I've been teaching photography at the high school level for 17 years. I've been teaching at the college level for about 4 years. And at the college level, I've taught both in person and online. I actually started letting my college students, because they weren't photo majors, but they were taking a photo one class. I started letting them use their phones. So there's enough things they have to spend money on in college anyway. So, so is it ideal? No. But this is the way that things are these days. It's a pandemic. So we let kids use phones. We might have to let them use Photopea or Pixlr or something like that. But thankfully, Lightroom Mobile is free. It's on their phones. They can get it for free. You can even log in, even on a Chromebook. I use it on my Chromebook all the time. When I'm out and about with my Chromebook and I don't have my good computer that's at home and I want to quickly edit something. I mean, if you have a free account, you can't do selective edits, but you can do basically all of the other main edits that you would want to do in Lightroom. And so you could do those things. And if you want to do things selectively, then have a student bring it into Photopea and they can do layer masks and all those kinds of things. But anyway, it's great that it works on the web. So it's just lightroom.adobe.com. And again, that's free. And we can still teach, shutter speed and aperture. Please, I've seen teachers online saying oh, I don't know if I can teach it anymore. They're using their phones. Well, first of all, there's apps where they can control their shutter. And there is portrait mode on iPhones. And I think Androids have something similar. Now, I have a lot against portrait mode. I even have a special presentation I give that has all these portrait mode fails in it. But it is a way, at least, for kids to start thinking about shallow depth of field. Is it ideal? No. But I teach them shutter speed and aperture anyway. For the ones that have DSLRs, they can use it. For the ones that don't and are using their phones, they can at least control their shutter. And if they ever get their hands on a DSLR, they'll know how to use it. And I still hold them accountable. They're still assessed on whether they know it or not. They still have to put together little projects about it, or it's on a test or a quiz or something like that. So they still need to know it. So please, please, please still teach shutter speed and aperture. And things like manual focusing and ISO and focus points and all those kind of things. Because even some of those apps, you can do manual focusing. So basic engagement over Zoom. You got to keep those kids active and engaged often. So there is a real thing called Zoom fatigue. So at the college level, I just finished teaching a 7-week class where we met for 2.5 to 3 hours once a week. These long classes, right? And you can see that the students get really tired. And maybe you've had some long Zoom meetings. There's something that about watching people's faces and having to really concentrate in a way that actually we don't have to in real life, that makes students very tired. So you have to keep them engaged. So there's all these great little things down here. But having them not be passive, and I'm going to talk about peaks and valleys later, but asking them all a question and having them all respond at once in chat so they can, because you can't have 20 people all talking at once in Zoom. It's just, it's chaos, right? But you can ask a question and have 20 people answer in the chat at once. So that at least gives them something active. They're typing, they're thinking, they're typing, they're contributing. Use the thumbs up, thumbs down. So when you're talking about something, ask them a question to whether they would agree or not. Or even ask them, should I go faster or go slower? Just anytime you're having them do a thumbs up, thumbs down, yes, no, anything like that. You can even assign something like, green would count for one thing, red would count for another thing, and have them, take a stand on something, and they just use those as a kind of to symbolize those two different things. And then you can build discussion off of the answers that they give. Here, this is in a math class, but press red if you think the answer is 3, green if you think the answer is 7, or press green if you think this is shallow depth of field, press red if you think this is greater depth of field. And that also gives you information about how the class is thinking, how they're doing, if they're understanding concepts. Use these strategies every 3 to 10 minutes to try to, again, bring them back into the classroom, because they're in their rooms, they're sitting on their beds, they've got tons of stuff around to distract them. You want to keep them engaged. Discussion over Zooms. You can use breakout rooms. You can have everybody log into a common Google Doc or group Padlet. If you don't know about Padlet, you have to learn about Padlet. It's awesome. Have them go into breakout rooms and discuss or type their answers. And then if there's one central place when you're looking at it, it's great because you can't be in every breakout group at once. But if you're on a Padlet and they're assigned to different areas and you see one group isn't working, then that's the breakout room that you should join. And you can kind of go around, and you can always be aware of how everybody's doing, looking at that central document, no matter what room that you're in. In terms of discussion too, that weird silence that happens in Zoom, I don't know why it doesn't matter in the classroom, but it is really weird over Zoom, but it is. So, those discussion kind of things that we do in our classrooms all the time, don't forget about those things. Like saying, for this next question, I'm going to call on Sally and then Joaquin, and then, say what the question is, and then have them go, and then they're ready to go, and you avoid that weird silence. Or do cold calling with a warning. So say, hey class, I'm about to cold call on all of you. I'm going to ask you a question. I'll give you a little bit of time to formulate an answer, but then I reserve the right to call on any of you. And again, that picks them up. That brings them back in where they are accountable and they're engaged. And it keeps them from zoning out. And also sometimes I know there's the little raise hand button in Zoom, but just have them actually physically raise their hand, because a lot of times when you're in gallery view in Zoom, it's almost easier to see that. It only works when you're in gallery view though. If they're over to the side and you can only see 5 kids in the class at a time, it doesn't work. But if they're in gallery view and you're having a discussion, then just have them physically raise their hand, because it's a lot easier to see and call on them. Okay. Teaching Photoshop and Photopea. Photopea is actually so similar to Photoshop that I don't understand why they're not sued or whatever. I, about 3 or 4 years ago, I took a grad class about flipping the art classroom. And so I've made asynchronous videos about Photoshop for all these years. And I have them in my Google Classroom and on my flipped kind of sheets or whatever, their study guides and stuff. And it's been great, I have to say, overall, just having them, because any kid who's sick or on vacation can watch them. Any kid who has an IEP and needs to get information but pause it and take notes, or works with an aide or with a special ed liaison so they can watch the video together, has been super, super helpful. And it's actually made this transition to remote learning much easier for me because I already have those videos. So I have to say that I just have students watch the videos about Photoshop, and then they have been able to do almost everything, even if they're using Photopea. In fact, it's not the way that Photopea is set up or the layout or the tools in Photopea that's a problem. The only problem is that it can be slow and laggy and stuff like that. So just teach Photoshop. Just teach Photoshop, and they can do what they can of it in Photopea. In a hybrid class, even like let's say that you teach Monday, Tuesday one group, Wednesday off for cleaning, Thursday, Friday with another group. Well, on Tuesday, teach something in Photoshop, have the kids that are physically in the class do it on Photoshop, have the kids who are at home do it on Photopea. And then on that Thursday, when you have the new group, this flipped or switched group, do that assignment again and have those kids that did it at home on Photopea do it in Photoshop. Have those kids who did it in Photoshop in class now do it at home on Photopea. And then they can see the difference. And you could even have them do a little reflective writing on how the experience was with the different software. But either way, when you're teaching Photoshop or Photopea, um, over Zoom, you have to give the kids studio time. So, what do I mean by that? When you're teaching over Zoom, it can be really strange when no one's talking. In class, we do it all the time. We're like, okay, this is how you do something in Photoshop. Okay, let's do it now, right? And the kids are quiet, or maybe they're talking to other friends or whatever. Maybe you have some music on, and they're working on it. Not a big deal, right? Somehow over Zoom, it seems very strange. But you need to include that time, that working time, even though people aren't actively talking to each other. So give a Photoshop tutorial, show them how to change shutter speed on their phones, explain a complicated idea, whatever it is, and then have everybody work on their computer, like right there in front of you, over Zoom, so they can try these things out, right? Because then if there is any difficulties, if their program's acting weird, their computer's acting weird, they can ask you about it right away and you can help them troubleshoot. So then later when they actually do the real assignment, you know that they already have the skills and they can basically make it work. So here's an example. Okay, first, explain the fixing tools, cloning stamp, healing brush, patch tool, those kinds of things. Then say, okay, students, I want you to bring a picture into Photoshop or Photopea, whatever you have. I want you to try out the cloning stamp. I want you to try out the healing brush. I want you to try out the patch tool. I just want to make sure that you can actually use these and they're working on your computer before you do the assignment later on your own. It's going to be all weird and silent. And you'll see them all lean into their computers and they'll have very concentrated looks on their faces. Here, I'm going to go back and show you this, by the way. If you don't know, that Robbie Cooper did this immersion project. I just put this up because it's pretty interesting. It's actually kids playing video games, but they do physically lean in. And I've noticed when I've taught over Zoom and given studio time, the students actually physically lean in. It's really interesting. And they start working on their computers and you see their little faces. So then if Sally or Joaquin has an issue, they can share their screen with you and you can help them through it. You could go into a breakout room and do it one-on-one, but why not do it in front of the class? The class probably doesn't even really have Zoom open anymore. They have Photoshop or Photopea open. So, if they hear you explaining what's going on, who cares? They either zone it out or it's something that would be really helpful to them. But give that actual studio time in class. It could be 20 minutes. They could be doing the assignment and everybody's just sitting there and everybody's working on it and you're just there to help. And you could check in with people if you want. You could even send private chat messages to everybody if you need to. Okay, so running critiques. So I think Padlet is a really good thing to use for critiques. I mean, you can have a whole group critique if you want and just share your screen or have a kid share their screen so you can see the images and have the whole group talk just like you might in a classroom, right? But Padlet's really nice. You set it up in shelf mode and then you just send out the link to it on Zoom chat. And all they have to do is click on the link and they can be in it. If they have an account, it's nice because their name is attached to it. If they don't, then it shows up anonymous, but then you can just have them sign their name. So here, like Maddie just signed her name right there. Um, and just have the students, like I just set it up which with each kid's name, and then they go under their name and they upload their image, and then other students go in and make comments on the pictures. And then you use that to build off of and have a discussion in the main room, or you could have them in breakout rooms. But even in the main room, you can say, like, oh, Maddie, I see how you commented on Emmett. Can you explain that a little bit? And then, hey, does anybody else who didn't comment on Emmett's, do you have anything to add to that? And just run it like you would a normal conversation or discussion. Or you can use breakout rooms, have them go into rooms, just maybe 2 to 4 people, share their photos with each other, have little mini critiques themselves. This is good, like kind of once you've trained them about critiques, to be able to do it on their own. And then maybe they come back to the main group and can share maybe 1 or 2 photos from each group. Just to show you real quick, like in Padlet. Oh, no, I didn't close it. It's right here. So see here, like, so if I was Drew, I would just press plus, and then I would go to here and upload a file, and I would upload a file, and that would be my photo. And then other kids, Luca and Emmett and Maddie, could go and comment on it, because anybody can like click on something and make a comment and type it up and whatever. So, and that what's really nice is that everybody sees, when you have it on Padlet, everybody sees what everybody has said about each other's work, and you can even save it as a PDF and share it with everybody. And then those students that are asynchronous, if you're in Hyflex, can go and read all this later and watch the Zoom critique that you did, and then add their own stuff to it. So let's go back to present. This video is ending up being much longer than I thought it was going to be. Okay. So peaks and valleys and agendas, both very important. Setting up an agenda and sending out before the Zoom class is great because it reduces anxiety for everybody. For the students, they know, oh, we're actually doing valid, good things today in class. And it also helps you set up and think and pre-plan your peaks and valleys. So what are peaks and valleys? It's times when kids are more active in class and times when they're more passive in class. So maybe you start with a mini lecture. You're down here, you're starting with a mini lecture. So they're just kind of receiving information. And then you give them 10 minutes to do it themselves. So, okay, that's a peak because they're all actively engaged. Everybody's in like Photoshop working on something. And then you switch to a discussion, and then you switch to a mini lecture, but you do that checking for comprehension every couple minutes, or voting red and green, or whatever it may be to keep them active. And then you do another mini lecture and then a breakout room activity, and you just kind of go back and forth and back and forth. And so again, like with the agenda, it really, really helps. So it keeps the kids on task, it keeps you on schedule, it lets you pre-plan those peaks and valleys. So a little mini lecture about portraits, then fixing skin demonstration in Photoshop and giving them time to practice. So that goes kind of up and down. And then maybe another little mini lecture, just about 5 minutes long or something. Then take a break. We'll talk about that in a second. And then another little mini lecture, and then group discussion, small group, and then large group, and then give them an introduction to a research project, and then they maybe start working on it and whatever. And you can always put like if time, so you have some other things to do, even if you end early. Or another example, introduction to Photoshop, take some notes, studio time, mini lecture. Oh, here, then find focal points on a website and then discuss them with each other, so you give them little activities and things to do. Again, it keeps them moving up and down in terms of engagement and activity and energy. So the last thing is present and absent breaks. There is that Zoom fatigue. Even if you keep them active and engaged and everything, it's very tiring. So you've got present breaks. So you take a minute to have everybody stretch or breathe or do some kind of, your legs can get very sore just kind of sitting there. Your back can get sore. Not everybody has a great office chair to sit in. So having some present breaks, like, okay, everybody, let's just take a minute to stretch. Let's put our hands in the air. Let's breathe in. Let's breathe out. And that will immediately get them to have more energy and be more engaged immediately after that. So if you find that everybody's kind of drifting away, it's good to have a quick 1 or 2 minute present break. And then also put in absent breaks. And that might be, hey, we're going to take 5 minutes to go do this. Or you could even say, we just talked about, positive and negative space in photography. We're going to have an absent break for 5 minutes. And I want everybody to go and take some pictures around their house or in their yard and come back and have them showing, positive and negative space. What I highly recommend is just Googling timer on Google, put up the 5 minutes, press start, have it count down. You can even make it full screen, turn off your video, put mute on yours, and encourage everybody else to do the same. So all that people are seeing is the timer, and they can check in and see how much time they have to come back, and that really, really helps everybody come back. If you just say vaguely like 5 minutes, it's like, and then they come trickling back in. But if you put a timer on the screen, it's much, much more helpful. So hopefully these are some techniques that help you in teaching online, or maybe take some anxiety away about teaching online. It's very doable, and I think that we're all going to be okay, and we can discuss with each other on Facebook. Please write comments if you see this on YouTube. If I've forgotten things, or if there are things that I didn't include that you think is a really good best practice, please let me know, because I want to get better and I want to do a better job for these kids. But I think all of this is really possible. And if you have any questions at all about anything I've said, please contact me and let me know.